Welcome to the Just Third Way podcast, where we ask the question, would you rather own or be owned? Brought to you by the Center for Economic and Social Justice at cesj.org.
Hello, podcast listeners. But once again, thanks for joining us. And hello to Mr. Peter Hayes. How you doing, Peter?
I am doing wonderful in Louisville, Kentucky, the center of the known universe.
Right. It is a great town. I love Louisville. I probably say it wrong. It's Louisville, right?
Louisville's good. That's Louisville.
Oh, okay.
Just don't
I
call
know
it
that
Louisville.
when I was a kid, everybody had a Louisville Slugger, and they said it that way. So
Yeah, exactly.
I got used to that. Then I started working for a company headquartered there, and most of them say Louisville.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks for being with us. I tell you, I'm trying to talk to people who've had, success spreading the movement, and that means you for sure. But before we go into details, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, I was born and raised in Long Island, New York, and spent most of my time in Westchester County outside of New York. And
I didn't know that.
Kind of interesting. Yeah, interesting story. My mom had passed away when I was 4 years old, so we had 6 kids, so we had to move from Long Island into Yonkers, which is kind of from the suburbs to the hood, if anyone knows where Yonkers is, not too far from the Bronx.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was kind of a mixed up, messed up, dysfunctional family. My dad was a truck driver, actually. He drove a truck for the Railroad Express.
How about that?
Unfortunately, he was a stone cold drunk, so he was quite a mess.
Well, I know how that can be. I've known other people in that situation, but it usually results in the kids getting as far away from that as they can.
Yeah, it's kind of a mixture. That reaction, but then others get into the same mess. It's kind of interesting how that works both ways.
In the genes.
Yeah, so we went from the suburbs to the hood, and then actually we were taken away by the New York Social Welfare Department because we were fairly unsupervised. So I grew up in foster homes until I was 18 years old from that time on.
Well, you turned out so amazingly normal. I never knew any of that kind of stuff, and that maybe drove you to try to do something really constructive with your life.
Yeah, out of the 6 kids, about half of us made it through. The other half got kind of wigged out pretty badly. So, yeah, it's not a easy lifestyle being a foster kid. I lived with 6 different families. Good thing is I had a variety. I've lived with some pretty middle class and some upper middle class families, and so that was quite interesting. That had a varied background also. So there's always each of our life courses always different stories that lead us to where we're at in life.
Right, and each person that's active in the Just Third Way and binary economics has an interesting story. And like talking to Joyce from India, she saw the class separation over there, and these sort of unique experiences, I think, drive people to look for different solutions and question reality. And
I think makes you question kind of the establishment or how things can be done differently or better. Yeah, so from there, I actually went from New York. I moved with a buddy of mine out to California when we were 18, right after high school. So that was an interesting experience. 3 days on the Greyhound bus, which I don't recommend to folks, but that was quite an experience. Traveling from New York City to San Francisco in 3 days on a Greyhound bus.
Oh, wow. And did you go to school in San Francisco?
I was planning to, and I was kind of living the hippy-dippy lifestyle, playing guitar, and, kind of mixed background. I got in a little trouble in New York, as a youngster, kind of got involved in the the drug scene as a teenager, and
hopefully you never had to go to jail for too long or anything.
No, I didn't. So I was headed down a pretty bad path at 19, but I actually had a spiritual awakening, and I kind of gave it all up, really went cold turkey, and that started kind of a spiritual journey for me to this day. And so, yeah, that was quite an interesting situation.
Well, that is good. It sounds like you ran into someone who at some point kind of helped you focus on something good and turn things around and right at a crucial time.
Yeah, and I was always questioning things, because actually that's an interesting story. When I was in that first foster home, I was, 5 years old and kind of wondering, I was actually just kind of meditating and praying, and I asked God a good question, hey dude, you're obviously whooping on my butt. What did I do to deserve this? It was,
right.
And it's a logical question, right? So what did I do? Just tell me so I can make amends. Because, from my standpoint, you killed my mom, made my dad an alcoholic, destroyed our family. Now I'm here in a all with foreign family and not a distant, and I never got an answer. So, and interesting, when I went to the religious leaders, no one can answer that question of, basic question that we all have, if God is good or, existence, how does evil exist? And that's a great question. Unfortunately, most of the religious leaders say, well, there's some things a mystery, and basically they didn't know the answer either, so they're trying to BS me.
Well, I always just say that, humanity chose to go away from God's perfect plan, and they opened themselves as a group up to, good and bad, and a lot of bad, and that may not be the path that you believe, but that's kind of what I've been taught, and that's about the only thing I know that can explain it.
Yeah, exactly. And it took me about 15 years until I was 19 to kind of come to that realization. So I stopped kind of blaming the Creator for my situation, because obviously he was not telling my dad, hey, it's a good thing to, get drunk and come home and beat your wife and the kids and, and all this situation. So he was not listening to his better self. So, yeah, that was a deep realization. I also realized that this world, it's messed up, not on purpose, but because, like I said, humans have made bad choices, and then we also can make good choices and change things around. So I'm an optimistic for sure. And I've been fortunate, as a 19-year-old, at that time, for 3 years I used to smoke pot 5 times a day. I was a total pothead. And
wow.
I thought my purpose in life was get high. I don't know why anyone else was created, but Peter Hayes was created to get high all the time. That was what I thought in my mind,
Wow.
And so that's what I was doing. So I had quite a transformation, and I've been fortunate. I've been 6 or 7 countries of the world doing ministry and nonprofit and political stuff, and a little knucklehead from New York. So it's opened up a big world for me. I've been fortunate to be in Korea, Japan, Russia, Israel twice, Kenya, Africa. So those are some of the countries I've traveled to.
Those are definitely places that need help, that's for sure. Most of them.
Yeah,
well, everywhere in the world needs help. and you've also ran for office, correct? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so in my travels, I lived in Ohio for 3 years, Toledo, Ohio. Then I moved to Louisville in 1988 to become president of the American Family Coalition. So I've done grassroots lobbying and kind of nonpartisan type political organizing. And then here in Louisville, I lived here, bought my house in 1990, and we had a really interesting situation where our airport was being increased, the size of it expanded, I should say. really
Okay.
to host UPS, because UPS has a huge facility here,
Right.
20,000
It's a good
employees.
central location.
Yeah. And so, unfortunately, the way the city did it, they displaced about 3,000 residents, and they really did it illegally and unconstitutionally. So I got involved with the American Family Coalition and actually went to a couple of meetings. I couldn't believe what was happening. They tried to use urban renewal to displace these neighborhoods. And what it came down to is that they were using the power of government to take private citizens' property and then resell it to businesses like budgets and hotels for profit. And,
oh my goodness! So they were trying to use eminent domain in a sort of unethical way.
Exactly. And so anyway, I got involved in the battle, and it was an eye-opener. But, I've always been kind of a warrior, justice warrior. Just don't like people being mistreated. And interesting, David, was a lot of the senior citizens in these three neighborhoods that were, the younger couples were. What happened? It was they claimed it was eminent domain, blighted neighborhoods, so they wanted to buy the 3,000 homes. So they bought, 1,500 people left. The other 1,500 started looking into it and felt that they were getting a raw deal. So they organized and they created three neighborhood associations, and they started fighting it. They took it all the way to the Kentucky Supreme Court. And amazingly, the Kentucky Supreme Court ruled 6-0 against the city of Louisville. And
wow.
It was unconstitutional. But it was so crooked, So we in Louisville at that time we had a separate city of Louisville and Jefferson County. Now it's the merged government. But anyway, so we had the mayor of Louisville and the county judge executive. Their number one fundraiser, Mr. Joe Corradino, had the Corradino Group. Well, Shazam, he was just so fortunate to get the contract for the airport and for the bus company, and he was the bag man for both of the leading politicians. And so they, and in their own plan, when we finally researched it and the lawyers, they only needed 5% of the land for the extension of the airport. And so so where was the 95% of the land going for? They were going to the budget and the rental cars and the hotels. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah. And as you know, eminent domain, if it's a public purpose, if you're building a highway or road, well, there's nothing much you can do. You got to take what they offer you,
Right.
But this was a clear case, wasn't the case. And the city tried to they really played hardball. Basically, we're just telling these people, well, you have to go and there's no choice. And thank goodness they were able to find a couple lawyers to take them on. And as soon as I looked at it, I could tell right away it was crooked. And,
it sounds like there was a lot more corruption there than I ever thought. Everyone in Louisville has always kind of struck me as being ethical and hardworking people, and it seemed almost like, the businesses and the governments that I have been exposed to were better than most places. So it just goes to show that, there is corruption everywhere.
Yeah, and things have gotten a lot better because, the problem is we had a one-party system. It was all Democrats. So it was 12 Democratic aldermen, Democrat mayor, all three county commissioners were Democrat, the county judge. So it was literally a one-party system. And me having been to Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union, one-party rule doesn't work anywhere in the world.
It doesn't work.
And so what got me involved is our alderman, he voted to destroy his own three neighborhoods. And we were like, oh, my goodness, what would possess you? So, as I said, those 1,500 people moved out. The 1,500 fought it. Well, guess what the city did, believe it or not? The city of Louisville started bulldozing those 1,500 homes while the other 1,500 people were still living there, Dave.
Oh, my goodness.
Can you believe it?
No.
It sounded like Saddam Hussein would do something against the Kurds, but they literally were bulldozing houses trying to force these other people to leave, and it was crazy. And
oh yeah, did the local news cover that?
well, I'm going to tell you, guess who was on the regional airport board appointed by the mayor? And I name names so people know that when they mess with Peter Hayes, I name names. Ed Manassas was the publisher of the Courier Journal. He was on the regional airport board. So, he, it was a good old boy network, and they had everything hush-hush. So we had a couple of press conferences we had exposed. So anyway, the reason I ran for alderman was, I tried to get someone to run. I told the 3 neighborhood leaders, someone's got to run against this guy. This is ridiculous. Well, no one was willing to run. So I literally went in the last day filing and put my name in and ran for alderman in the Democratic primary.
Wow.
And it was a very interesting experience. And I ended up winning 9 of the 16 precincts, and I got 43% in the Democratic primary, which was in May, so I filed in January. But at that time, a friend of mine who had worked with Dr. Martin Luther King, his name was Reverend James Bevel, had come to Louisville, and he shared this concept of the precinct council, which was really fascinating. It was what he described it as a modern unit of self-government. And of course, you know what a precinct is, right? Everybody votes in a precinct. It's the basic unit of all government where all districts are decided. And Reverend Bevel, he had actually he had done a 21-day water fast back in the 60s when he was working in the movement, and he was meditating on the Lord's Prayer, and he came up with this insight of what the Lord's Prayer means as far as modern institution. So he put it together in the precinct council, and it's really fascinating. So the Our Father who art in heaven, that's your church committee. So the idea is in each precinct you have 6 different committees. So the Our Father is your church committee. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. That's your government committee, self-government. Give us this day your daily bread. That's your business, economic development committee. Forgive us our trespasses. So that's the clinic committee. Lead us not on temptation is the family committee. And then deliver us from evil is the education committee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so isn't that fascinating? So you got those 6, and you think about it, those are 6 major stakeholders. There's not much outside of life that church, government, business, clinic. And clinic means kind of where people go for help, like alcohol or domestic abuse, kind of social services,
right.
Healing. And then families, to strengthen families, and then, of course, education. But when you see it, it's like, oh, my Lord, when you see the connection with the Lord's Prayer and the precinct council, it's really fascinating. So when I ran for alderman, I proposed that I was going to create 16 different precinct councils made up of 12 people. So anyone who lived in a precinct, which a precinct's about 1,000 people, so it's quite a lot of folks.
Right.
And interesting enough, in America, there's about 300,000 precincts in America. So
wow.
That's how many there are. And so it's about 1,000. We got a little over 300 million people. So the idea is create a precinct council of 12, and any citizen who lives in that precinct could run to be a precinct councilman. And the neat thing is we encourage every single resident, all 1,000 residents, to become really true citizens and serve on one of those committees. And it's really nothing but, as you know, like early America, when, you had, there wasn't no bureaucratic government. People had to govern themselves, right?
Right, right.
And everyone pitched in, and there was no paid politicians or paid bureaucrats. If you needed a school built, well, by golly, everyone came together and built the school, right? Or built the church, or built the town hall. So anyway, the precinct council is really a fascinating concept. So I ran on that, and, the people really, really were inspired by it. They wanted to be involved. And so I think that's the main reason why I won 9 of those 16 precincts. I won some of those precincts, Dave, by 80% against a 10-year incumbent.
Oh, that's great. So you were the alderman?
No, I didn't. I didn't win. I got, like I said, I got 43%.
Oh, 43. I thought there were maybe multiple people running.
No, there was 2 of us. I ran against.
You almost won.
Yeah, I won a majority of the precincts, but I lost by like 450 votes. But interesting enough, so what happened? The mayor jumped in the race, though, Jerry Abramson, and he sent out, because he was very afraid that I was going to be on the board of aldermen and expose all this corruption out at the airport and other things. Another big issue we had going on was we had a big gay rights battle, and as President of the American Family Coalition, I was against giving special protection based on sexual orientation. And, you know, our mayor, very interesting, he would not come out and say whether he supported it or not. You know, all 12 aldermen had a vote on it. Everyone in the community, it was the number one issue for about 3, 4, 5 years. And he claimed he didn't have a position. And
he was working behind the scenes.
Exactly. And Jerry Abramson was very powerful, just so you know a little bit about him. He was also at that time president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. You know, very powerful individual. He was planning to run for governor or U.S. Senate on his way to the White House. I mean, his folks had a plan to become president of the United States of America. And very slick politician. He ended up being lieutenant governor, but he never became governor or senator. But I'll tell you the reason, because I was the one who actually stopped him. You know,
I think I remember you telling me this story that you met someone at the FedEx office place or Kinko's or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But,
wow.
The mayor blasted me, and he sent out a letter on the Saturday before the Tuesday election. That's, you know, the race for the Board of Aldermen. Alderman is our city council, so just so you're familiar. It's like
so you had met someone that he had been involved in some impropriety, let's put it that way, with or something.
Yeah, yeah. But that was before I knew about this. But actually, it happened when I went to copy some of my precincts. But you know, but I was on TV quite a bit debating the gay rights issue, and you know, we actually even had some of the African American ministers had a protest that I was going to sit in the mayor's office, trying to tell us how was he for it or against it. And he was slick, so he wouldn't come out. Anyway, I ended up losing, and I was going to run for alderman again, because with 2 years walking neighborhoods, I would have beat him, the incumbent, because I only had 4 months. And I did walk to 4,000 homes, but there were 6,000 homes. So what they did is, in the redistricting, they took 6 of the 9 precincts that I won out of the 4th ward and distributed them among other districts, because they knew that I was going to take that seat. And
gerrymandered it.
Yeah, but this is how the political shenanigans started. You know, and this is in the city of Louisville. You wouldn't think about it, you know, but it's all over. And then 2 other Democrats. Now I was running a Democratic primary, so 2 other Democrats decided to run in '93. So it was very difficult. You really can't beat an incumbent, you know, with 3 or 4 challenges. So when I prayed about it, the Lord told me, well, you run against Jerry Abramson, run against the mayor. And my mission was to stop his political career, which was interesting. It wasn't really to win the election. And it was quite a challenge, kind of like if you remember the story in the Bible about Moses, when the Lord asked him to go into Egypt and tell Pharaoh, you know, let my people go. He was kind of like, oh, my goodness, well, I'm not a good speaker. He tried to get us out of it.
Wow.
And, you know, he tried to tell the Lord, well, I'm not a good speaker, so I don't know if I'm man for the job. But then the Lord said, well, I'm going to have your brother Aaron go where he can speak. So he had no choice. So he had to go into Egypt. The famous story of, you know, the Jewish people, the Exodus, leaving Egypt. But anyway, it's to run against run for the mayor of a major city. That's a big challenge.
Right.
But, I've been trying to be faithful when my intuition, told me to do something. So I filed, and was very interesting. 2 days after I filed to run for mayor against Jerry Abramson, I got a call from a state representative and an alderman who knew me, actually, because I was definitely a pro-life, pro-family, conservative Democrat.
Right.
Which in Kentucky at the time there was a bunch of them.
Right.
There was a bunch of conservative Democrats, not really anymore, but in the 90s. So anyway, they called me, and guess what? They offered me a $60,000 city job with full benefit if I would drop out of the race.
Oh my goodness!
Isn't that something?
That is amazing.
Little Peter Hayes. Oh, I forgot to tell people. So my campaign theme was Better Days with Peter Hayes. So I had a wonderful campaign theme.
Oh, that's pretty good.
With Peter Hayes. Yeah.
So you must have gone and made some rounds on some radio shows and stuff like that, because you ended up meeting a lot of influential people, like, people that eventually started listening to what you were saying about economic reform, I believe, because we've just had all kind of interest from Louisville in the just third way and capital homesteading, and it's just amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And under the precinct council, now, interesting, and this relates to capital homestead, so I was looking for ways of how, so you got the concept of the precinct council, how do we fund it? Now, at the time, each alderman got $100,000 for neighborhood reserve funds.
Right.
Basic for projects in their district, which is commonplace across America. Most city councils get a certain amount of money,
It's like a budget.
Paving, sidewalk stuff,
Yeah.
And a lot of them would use this money for slush funds. They would give it to their churches and nonprofits.
Wow.
Buy them a computer or this, that. Basically to buy support. And this is interesting. So I went in I'm a candidate for all of them. I'm the Democratic candidate for all of them. I went in and asked for the printout of all 12 wards, districts for 10 years. And the city attorney, his name was Bill Stone, told me I did not have the right to have that information, Dave.
Wow.
Government spending of how they spent that $100,000 a year. Now, first of all, as a citizen, I should have that right? Any citizen should say, I want to see how you're spending my tax dollars.
Absolutely.
But as a candidate for office, I certainly should have that. Well, he told me no. And, he thought, he didn't know that Peter Hayes knew a little trick or two. So I sued the city of Louisville under the Freedom of Information Act.
Wow.
And voila, after 3 days, I got all 12 wards for 10 years. And I found out some very, very interesting stuff.
Oh, I bet you
did. So getting
did.
back to my fourth ward, we had 16 precincts. So we get $100,000 a year, okay? So that amounts to about $6,000 a year for precinct, really. Well, guess what? 8 of 16 precincts, half of them got $0 for 10 years.
Wow.
And the other 8 precincts were getting $10,000-$15,000 a year. And now when I looked at it, I said, whoa, something's wrong. And guess what, Dave? And this is the Democrat. I've heard the Democrat Party, well, we're for poor people, blah, blah, blah. So you would think, well, they would spend money in the poor area, right?
Right.
You would say, guess what? Those 8 precincts were the poorest precincts in the 4th Ward.
Oh, that's sad.
0 for 10 years.
Oh, that's sad.
And the precincts where I live by the zoo and, we were getting $10,000-$15,000 a year. We didn't need any of it.
How about that?
Guess what? The poor precincts have very low voter turnout. 20%.
Right.
We had 60, 65, 70%. So these politicians, they put the money where the voters were, not where the need was. But anyway, so I looked at this and I said, well, that's not fair. So one of my proposals was I was going to give each precinct $5,000 a year. That would have been, 5 times 16, 80,000. Still would have left me with 20,000 for kind of emergencies.
Right.
And I was going to let these precinct councils of 12 citizens democratically decide what their needs were in their neighborhood.
Yeah.
I was changing the whole paradigm. I was flipping the script, because instead of me, the alderman, telling them how I was going to spend their tax dollars, they were going to tell me.
Right. That's
which is supposed to be America.
Yeah, it's supposed to be accountability and involvement and ownership.
The people for the.
Exactly.
So that was one reason people love the idea. And I would say 99% of the people didn't even know we got 100,000 per precinct per ward. They're like, "Whoa! I didn't know we got this money." Yeah, when I showed them the printout, said, "Look, your precinct got zero for 10 years, and those folks over there got 15,000. Is that fair? You pay taxes." Yeah. So anyway, it was quite enlightening, and so it was very educational. But so then when I ran, after they tried to bribe me with that $60,000 a year, I felt very strongly my intuition, and I call it my creator or God. Some people don't quite understand that. But he had told me to stop the mayor, Jerry Abramson's political career. So could I just sell out for $60,000? No. And I was making only $25,000 a year as a graduate, so $60,000, hey, that was
like tempting.
Jesus was great, three temptations. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How about
that?
I
said, nope, I'm not interested. So I continued, and then they started slandering me and using the media. And so there were actually three of us ran against Jerry Abramson. So there was four of us in the primary, and so the three of us, we had a press conference asking for 3 debates in the mayoral race. Well, and this was quite interesting. So we had the press conference, and the newspaper came TV, and they covered it. And the next day in the newspaper, the mayor, Jerry Abramson's people, said, well, we're not going to, and it's interesting, Dave, they didn't mention the 2 other candidates. They said, we're not going to debate Peter Hayes, who's a religious bigot candidate.
Oh, my goodness.
They called me a religious bigot candidate for opposing the special rights for the gay rights. They wouldn't debate.
That is ridiculous.
So what happened is the next day, and I called up the Democratic Party chairman, Sean Delahanty. I said, hey, we're both Irish Catholics. I'm from New York. I'm a street fighter, Sean. You better tell your boy, he's playing with a street fighter in New York, okay?
Wow.
I'm a converted little gangster, so he better chill out. Basically, what I told him. But anyway, so the next day I fired back in the newspaper, and I said, well, we're more what this is about is we know Jerry Abramson supports the gay rights. He's just chicken. He's not man enough. I called him out. He's just not man enough to tell us where he stands.
Wow.
And I said that, I told him that, Jerry Abramson is trying to turn Louisville into a San Francisco on the Ohio River, quote.
Wow.
So remember that term, San Francisco on the Ohio River.
Okay.
He hit me below the belt, so I hit him back.
Yeah.
And so his spokesman in that same article, that said, well, we're more concerned that Peter Hayes is going to turn Louisville into a Waco on the Ohio River. Oh, boy, that's another low blow, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
But they wouldn't debate.
Oh, that's terrible.
So we're going along, but the long story and short of it, it got so rough we called in the FBI. They literally threatened me. And I was offered, like I told you, some pictures of the mayor and some compromising situations. And, with the guy at the Kinko's, I won't go into all the detail, but it was pretty fascinating. But
wow.
The bottom line is I was offered some pictures and then I was threatened the last days of the campaign, but we called in the FBI and they, but I lost. So that was in 1993. But in 1994, the Democratic primary for governor, who filed but Jerry Abramson, right?
Huh.
Remember I told you his plan was to run for governor? So
Oh, yeah.
onto the White House. He's a front runner. He gets the endorsement of the Courier-Journal, which is a Louisville newspaper, and the Lexington Herald-Leader. The two big newspapers endorse him. He raises $100,000 in a week. He's in La Flint, right?
Wow.
Two other candidates, one of the candidates, Bob Babbage, who was the Secretary of State, he had a press conference and he mentioned San Francisco on the Ohio.
Oh, that's funny.
Where did that come from?
Yeah, from you. Yeah.
A year earlier. Okay. And shockingly, Jerry Abelson dropped out of the race the next day. Unexplained.
How about
so
that?
Did I fulfill my mission of stopping his political career?
Evidently so. Yeah, you sure did.
So I feel good. I completed my mission, even though it was, it was pretty exciting and, but anyway, I've always been a fighter. But, that led me to, when I heard about the Capital Homestead Act, it kind of clicked that, well, wow, this would be a great addition to the precinct council, the fact that we could use the Capital Homestead in a just third way to finance, to bring about the economic justice.
Right. I mean, it would empower people at the individual level and sort of bring the way society works back into a, system of accountability and ownership and
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, all the same values that you were talking about. So that must have been later, like toward the later part of the 90s or early 2000s when you actually heard about it.
Yeah. But getting back, so in 91 when I ran for alderman, I was using the government money. Now, when I ran for mayor, I said, well, not only are we going to do the precinct council in one ward, we're going to do all 12 wards, and we're going to have a Louisville precinct council. So the way it would work is, let's say you're elected as your precinct chairman in your precinct, Dave.
Yeah.
Well, you along with your colleagues would be on the, city council level. So right now we have 26 city councilmen because, like I said, they merged the Louisville and Jefferson counties now. So
okay.
I developed a plan that so most of the city council districts have about 20 precincts, give or take, okay?
Right.
So you and your 19 other colleagues would be on the first district neighborhood precinct council. You would be an advisor for that elected leader, okay? You and your 19 colleagues that would be literally representing every single citizen. Because the great thing about the precinct council, we would literally challenge every citizen to be involved in one of those 6 committees.
Wow.
And it's like, come on, dude, you can't tell me you're not interested in church. You believe in praying for your neighbors? Okay, great. Be on the church committee.
Right.
Church. And interesting enough, there's 300,000 precincts, as I mentioned earlier. There's also 300,000 churches in America.
Right.
So there's almost one church per precinct.
That's
okay,
interesting.
If you want to do church work, if you want to do government work, you want to see better government, you want to do block watches, you want to be on the government committee.
Right.
What about business, economic development? You own a business or want a business, you'll be on the business committee. Do you believe in helping people, better families or domestic violence or alcohol, be on the committee. If you got education, and you have any kids in the school, you want to improve the schools, be on the school committee. How can you say, well, no, dude, none of those interest me?
Yeah.
What do you so literally we would challenge all 1,000 residents to be in part of the self-government.
Yeah.
And anyone could run for precinct councilman, just like they could run for office. Now there's only 12 of them, but imagine if there was 20 or 30 on each of those committees. You'd have 6 times 20. That'd be 120 grassroots leaders in each precinct.
Unfortunately, the way things are right now, it's probably hard to find 100 people in a group of 1,000 that even care.
You would be surprised because we've experimented. We walked some precincts, and one precinct we found 9 people willing to serve on a precinct council in about 1/4 of a precinct. So,
oh, well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. That's an encouraging.
So you would be surprised. And we estimate if you had 1%, even 1%, I would hope that we could find 1 out of 1,000, right? 10 people in a precinct. The idea is if we had 1%, of the people engaged, and part of my plan was so if you take that $5,000 per precinct for Louisville, for example, if your neighborhood really needed economic development, we proposed to take that $5,000 as seed money, start a fruit and vegetable business. You had 1,000 customers for a fruit and vegetable business, you'd do pretty good, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So we were proposing that all 1,000 people would own that business, kind of like ESOP, okay?
Oh, okay.
Before I met Dr. Curlin.
Right.
This was back in 91, 93. So I started coming up with these plan of ownership. And, and then maybe you take the profits and you hire someone from the neighborhood. So, especially in the inner cities where you literally have no businesses. Well, if you had 1,000 customers, you could start a decent little business. If you had 1,000 customers, you could flourish a restaurant, right? Couldn't you?
Yeah,
With
yeah.
1,000 customers. And imagine if all 1,000 neighborhood people own that restaurant, they had a share in that. Where are they going to go? Are they going to go to the big chains, or are they going to go to their own business?
Yeah, that's a good point. I've often thought about that. Like in old Europe, the pubs, each town had a pub, and that's where they got together to do the business of government and stuff.
Yeah, and they had small little, bread shops and stuff. Yeah, so it's a concept. So, in those really poor inner city neighborhoods, that they could pool their resources. So you had 5,000. Now, in a city councilor, there's 20. That's $100,000 a year. Imagine if you could start some decent businesses for $100,000, right?
Right.
And imagine if all 20,000 people own that gas station. You think that gas station would flourish with 20,000 owners, customers?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
So you must have been talking to people about these kind of things, and at some point someone mentioned binary economics or Kelso's ideas, or how did you?
Yeah, and believe it or not, it's a fascinating story because as president of American Family Coalition, we used to have these national American leadership conferences, what we call them, and Dr. Curlin was a speaker at one of them.
Oh, okay.
This was probably in the 80s. I would say, 88. It was probably early 90s. Okay?
Oh, okay.
I didn't really know him at the time, but I remember hearing him at one of the conferences talking about ESOPs. One thing that stuck with me were ESOPs were like a couple percentage points better than non-ESOPs on the stock exchange. So that made sense to me.
Right.
Where people would own the company. So we didn't connect at that time, but later on, this was probably 7 or 8 years ago. Actually, it was through Guy Stevenson. He was having his conference calls about.
Yeah, he was involved with the American Independent Party, maybe, or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I got on one of the conference calls through someone, and just kind of met him, and then he introduced me to Dr. Curlin, and we just hit it off, and he shared, and it wasn't until probably a year later so that I realized, oh my goodness, I had heard you speak in D.C. because we used to work a lot with the Washington Times newspaper and American Leadership Conference, so then I found out, oh my goodness, he knew some of the same people, and
wow.
I realized it was him that I had heard.
How about that?
15. Yeah, so it was quite interesting.
That is. So then the second time that the information came to you or whatever, you were looking for solutions like that, and so it was Guy that introduced you, but you started talking to Norm, and then you started talking to other people, because now
Martin Smith comes into the scene, and Mashorn Daniels, and these guys have turned out to, bring in hundreds of people into the movement, So how do you bring it up when you're talking to these people?
Well, I think you're right, because I was kind of geared towards looking for solutions and kind of looking outside the box.
Right.
Let me finish a little of my political history.
Okay.
So after running for alderman and mayor in the Democratic Party, I actually switched over to the Republican Party.
Oh.
And one of my friends who was a Democratic alderman, he ran for mayor, and he became the first African-American and the only African-American in Louisville to be nominated by a major party. So he switched from Democrat, Republican, and me, him, and another person kind of left the Democratic Party. There was a Jefferson County Republican Party, but the city of Louisville had no Republicans, basically.
Right.
They didn't even run a Republican for alderman for like 30 years.
Wow.
So there was 12 Democratic aldermen and the mayor.
That's why the Democrat primaries was the election.
Yeah, exactly. Bill Wilson was his name, and interesting enough, it's very fascinating because I met him when I was running for alderman and running for mayor, and he was the only what we call pro-family African-American alderman or elected official. There was 8 of them. All 7 of them were pro-gay rights, pro-homosexual, and the newspaper and the establishment was putting a whole lot of pressure on them to be pro-homosexual.
Huh.
And it turns out the newspaper the editorial board was just loaded with homosexuals and lesbians. And They were really pushing it hard.
And I should mention, as we talk about these things, that CESJ does not take a position on that kind of thing. But, this is an example of political circles that you can be in. I mean, there could be a, homosexual group that started to get interested in capital homesteading and promote it, and we would work with them on that. I mean, but it is these groups that get together and talk about things, and, economics is important to so many people, and there's nothing wrong with, you and I being in a real pro-family organization and talking about these things, and it just so happens that is also, I guess, the majority of the CESJ people are, more faith-based and stuff like that. But I didn't want to alienate anyone who might be listening and, wanting to just cut us off.
Kind of my story, yeah.
Right.
Because, it's really just special interest groups to them or anyone else,
right.
The influence. But, but it's interesting because they wanted Bill Wilson, the alderman, to vote for the gay rights, okay?
Huh.
And he said he couldn't do that because of his religious beliefs. So they targeted him and defeated him.
Wow.
And this is the newspaper. The editorial board brought him into their office, and this is what Bill told me, that, they told him, "Hey, Bill, we've endorsed you and supported you." And he said, "Yep, I appreciate your support." He said, "We need you on this gay rights." And he said, "Well, I can't do it." They brought him in twice, Dave. Now, why is the newspaper editorial board bringing in a politician lobbying for an issue?
Yeah, really.
They're supposed to be reporting the news.
They're supposed to just be
That's
reporting.
where the whole fake news comes up, that I relate to, because they've gone from reporting the news to making the news, and they literally when the second time he said he couldn't support them, they turned on him. They had a real bad news article, and they beat him in the primary. And anyway, it's just very interesting how the establishment was lobbying on behalf of that issue.
Yeah.
And healthy debate is good. Hey, I've told people I totally respect people that are on the other side of the issue, but what I didn't really care for is people were hiding their position.
Right.
And like the mayor, he turned out he was pro-homosexual and he voted for it, but he didn't have the guts
Right.
To to come out and say. And I told some of the leaders that I debated, said, well, hey, there was a couple of aldermen that were very strongly pro-gay rights. Said, hey, I totally understand your position and respect you. You're coming out and making your case, and I'm trying to make the case for those of us who don't think that sexual orientation deserves special status.
Right.
But anyway, it was interesting that the newspaper was lobbying, elected official, and then they turned on them.
Huh.
They literally was a major factor of getting him out of office.
Wow.
So then you had all 8 elected officials, African Americans, were pro-homosexual. And that's important because around the country, they've always tried to place it as a civil rights issue.
Right.
Really not, but that's a whole nother topic.
Oh yeah. But do tell us how you started talking to some of these people about capital homesteading, because something you've done has worked. You may not even realize it, but something you've done has worked. And I'm always trying to identify what that is, because so many people just, their eyes glaze over when I talk about it, And
yeah.
so I was telling.
Well, anyway, I became quite active in the Republican Party, but had a little falling out. But the point is on that. I've seen a lot of corruption in both political parties. That's why I'm really, was inspired by the Unite America Party.
Right.
And I did realize that the big money people control both parties. And there's a good old boy network. They may look like they're fighting each other, but it's really, I call it the two political mafias. Gambinos and Lucchese's.
Well, it's all a distraction. They want to, sort of manufacture this conflict so that it distracts us from the real issues. And to me, one of the main issues is the corruption of money in general.
Exactly. So anyway, I just shared the concept of, understanding ESOPs and also how it relates. I try to keep it simple. Like I shared, Mishore and Daniels was someone I knew. I just shared, put him in touch with Dr. Curlin. Same thing with Martin Smith. Then when we started the Unite America Party, that was, I think that gained us a lot of momentum. And, it's an interesting story. So Dr. Curlin had told me about the American Revolutionary Party, and I checked out the website, and I was kind of inspired. So I called him up one night, and I said, we ought to get this thing cranking again.
Right.
I was trying to get him to run for president, and he was kind of, I don't want to do it.
Right.
So so we had contacted a gentleman in Illinois who had done the website, and you were in on some calls. We were thinking of keeping the American Revolutionary name, and then on some of the calls, and then I got Martin Smith involved and Mishore, and
I think it was Martin's idea to call it the Unite America Party. Yeah,
he came up with that idea, and we all liked it, and so we said, let's run with it.
Right.
And so, I think just opening up to like-minded people, and, I tell people when things are truly truth and good means it's good for all people. So the Capital Homestead Act helps 100% of the people. It's not the rich versus the poor. We're not attacking the 1%. It's a little to benefit all 100% of the American citizens.
Right.
Worldwide citizens. So, imagine if we had a world Capital Homestead Act. And so, something is true when it benefits all of mankind.
Right.
And even people say, well, we're for the 99%, and we're against the 1%. That's off, because, if you're trying to attack the 1% or take away from them, then your motivation is off.
Yes, absolutely.
But when you can truly, when we can truly say it benefits 100% of the people, we know that it's correct.
Right. Yeah.
And I really believe it has the potential to wipe out extreme poverty.
Absolutely.
And I try to keep it, imagine if each person got $7,000 a year to invest in the stock market or, equities. It wouldn't cost them a dime.
Right.
And a family of four, if you had a single mom with 3 kids, that family would get $28,000 a year to invest. And, it would be a game changer for a lot of people.
It really would. Well, that's a good way to do it. Just, tell them the basics of it and explain how it would help everyone. So that's a good way to communicate
people,
it.
When people, as you know, they're concerned about their own finances and family, so you make it like, well, hey, I've done this. Hey, I remember a couple of times we were in a restaurant and asked the waitress, hey, would you like another $7,000 a year? Would that interest you? And she said, yeah, sure. We started talking about the Capital Homestead Act.
Oh, that's good.
I would also ask them, imagine if you were owner of this restaurant, if you owned it along with your colleagues, would that be something you would be interested in? And they all said, yeah, that would be. So
right. Bring it to their level and their reality.
Exactly.
That's good.
And make it so it's relatable. Because, you got academics and others, but, and I feel comfortable talking with them. I've talked to presidents and governors and, but I'm also comfortable in the hood.
Yeah.
Part of that's my background growing up where I did,
Right.
I can talk to all those people or people in the hood and, I talked to the governor, mayors and police chiefs, and I've talked to a couple of presidents of nations, actually. I shared the concept of the precinct councils with some African leaders about 10 years ago, and they really caught it.
That's good. I think people can sense in you sort of a service heart. That's how I've always thought of you because of, your email address says Service for Peace, and we haven't really talked about that, but part of your servant heart is that organization, right? So you're actually the coordinator for Kentucky, is that right?
Well, I started out in Kentucky, and then now for the last 5 years, I've been U.S. National Director for Service for Peace. And what we do is you use community service as a peacemaking tool, and we're also been involved nationally with the Martin Luther King Day of Service. So we kind of Martin Luther King Day encourage people to come out and volunteer and give back to their community. And then we're also a national lead agency for the 9/11 National Day of Service and Remembrance.
Oh, wow. So you've been busy lately.
So every year we do those 2 major holidays, and, we recruit 40,000 volunteers a year across the country, so it's a big operation.
Well, it is.
Campuses and universities, and like the city of Bloomington will bring out like 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 volunteers a year on Martin Luther King Day, and University of Miami and different universities, will bring out a couple hundred volunteers. And so that's kind of the role, like you said, if you, serving other people.
Yeah. I think
Dr. King had a famous quote that everybody can be great because everybody can serve.
That's right. And I think you told me one time that one of the objectives is to bring down the barriers between, the separation and have, maybe a conservative and a liberal working side by side, painting the house or whatever. And that always stuck in my mind when you told me that. It's a great concept.
Yeah, we intentionally will bring groups, like we've done work overseas, like in Israel and Palestine. One of my great experience in life was organizing a peace pilgrimage to Israel, where we actually worked in the West Bank right near Bethlehem and in a Bedouin village, and we put together Palestinian and Israeli, and we had college students from Austria, Catholic students, and we had Muslim students from Turkey. So it was an international event, and because we were helping this Bedouin village, there was a little kindergarten, and we were painting murals. So we spent like a week together. But, we did that on purpose to break down barriers.
Oh, that's great.
People are sweating and working together, kind of like what's going on now with Florence and disaster. You know, you don't see those barriers that maybe normally. If someone needs help, you just help them, right?
Right. It's like someone told me that their favorite day, even though it was a tragedy, was the day after September 11th, when the country seemed like an actual unit, you know? And we were together.
And that was quite amazing. 9/11 was a tragedy, but it also brought the country together, and there was incredible spirit of unity. And I'd say it lasted for about 6 months, pretty solid.
Yeah, it did. So what about, do you have a website if any of the Just Third Way fans want to get involved with Service for Peace?
Yeah, they can go to serviceforpeace.com.
Okay.
Or serviceforpeace.org.
Okay.
Serviceforpeace.org is more international, and then the serviceforpeace.com is more Kentucky and U.S.
Okay. Well, that's good. And I would like to mention that, since you were talking about it, we do have some people who are very interested in forming a political party, and we've actually had some meetings in your area thanks to you and Martin, and it's the Unite America Party. And if you're interested in helping to organize that, you can go to uniteamericaparty.org. So, man, time flies when we're talking. I'm already talking about wrapping it up, but I wanted to also mention I put together a voicemail phone number for listeners. They can call in and make comments and just leave your name and just make a comment, and I'll play it on the air. It's 678-719-2840. We're not quite to the live call-in stage. I don't think I'm that good yet, but this way it'll kind of move us a little closer where people can have some involvement anyway. But, man, it's great to go into detail with you a little bit.
Yeah, and I think the future, obviously the two major economic systems of socialism and capitalism has not been able to bring about the desired results in the world. We have a very, unequal amount of economic, empowerment. So I think the Just Third Way and Capital Homestead Act is definitely an idea whose time has come.
It has.
And, it just makes sense that, when people own their are owner of their company or their home, they take care of it more and more involved. So it's something that it's definitely the wave of the future.
Right.
I think no matter what, it's coming. So hopefully people would help us with us. And, imagine if we could pass the Capital Homestead Act pretty quickly and then spread it around the world.
Boy, things would change very, very fast. They really would.
Yeah, because with technology and artificial intelligence, it's a whole nother world. And, the old, be displacing workers. Actually, I saw Mark Cuban, who everyone knows, is very famous owner of the Dallas Mavericks and been there, and he's someone we need to get in touch with because he was mentioning artificial intelligence is displacing laborers worldwide. And he made a point on this TV interview that, it's not enough just to retrain workers for jobs that aren't going to be there, but that he suggested that companies, if they laid off people, they should give them ownership in their company, which was quite interesting, don't you think?
Yeah, it is. That's very, very.
He's almost there. Yeah.
Pertinent to what we're saying.
AT&T had to, let go of 10,000 workers. A lot of times they'll offer a severance or some training, but if they really can't get a job, imagine if they offered some stock in AT&T. That's was his suggestion. And so that's, I think, getting closer. More and more people are thinking for new ways, and the Just Third Way is definitely the wave of the future.
Absolutely. Yep. More people are getting educated as to the flaws in the system and the corruption, and it's going to change. It might take a collapse. I hope it doesn't. But whatever the case, there's no better solution that I've found. So hopefully something will materialize soon. But I really appreciate you taking the time to talk tonight. And
wonderful, Dave, and you keep up the great work.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So if anybody else that you know has any, suggestions about the podcast, they can email me, rdhamill@gmail.com. And I guess with that, we'll sign off, and I'll talk to you again soon. So thank you again, Peter.
And remember, if you want better days, vote for Peter Hayes.
There you go. And I like that. And I'll sign off with own or be owned.